All right, so here we are today at another episode of Real Rich Advice. Today we're going to be talking about 5 changes that COVID has had on the market over the last few months. First change obviously being that we are doing this over Zoom, where we'd normally be doing this sitting next to each other. I'm Jordan, this is my father and teammate Ned, and we're going to be going through 5 of the differences that COVID has had on the market. Dad, you want to go ahead and kick it off with number 1?
Sure. Well, as Jordan said, we're practicing social distancing, which is why we're doing this via Zoom. So the first thing that we want to talk to you about is that people are weeding out properties. So Jordan, why don't you explain to everybody how people are weeding out properties?
So people are seeing less properties than they were before. We are finding that whereas previously buyers pre-COVID were seeing maybe half a dozen, maybe even more properties before coming to a decision, a lot of buyers are eliminating properties online virtually before going out to see properties. The consequence is that people are maybe only seeing 2, 3, 4 properties before making a decision. There's been a lot of talk about the demand for virtual content, and it's a little bit cliche that everybody's going virtual, but there is some truth to it. The big things that we're finding are helpful when trying to deliver to a virtual buyer to help that buyer choose a property over another is providing not only the usual photos, virtual tour, 3D scan, and floor plans, but we're also finding that actually doing some interactive video, which shows a little bit more of the highlights of a property, is really important, as well as photographing some of the interesting elements of a property that we wouldn't typically see in photographs. For example, the interior cabinets, a little bit more detail when it comes to closets and those sort of things. Using visual mediums is really important because, as you probably know, buyers, a lot of people don't like to read. They like to see what they're looking at. And so if we make a long text that we normally would do, people are hesitant to read it. They're just going to skip through all the photos and make a choice on a property. By showing them either in a video where we're actually narrating or photos that are explicitly showing an element, we ensure that a buyer sees something that's important to the property and not rely on them to have to read it in the description. So that's sort of how people are doing things. They're weeding out properties and they're only seeing 2, 3, 4 properties for the most part, whereas it used to be they would look at a bunch, even some that they sort of knew. So the next item that we're going to talk about really relates to the first, is that we're seeing less second showings and people tend to be writing offers on the first showing. Take it away.
Absolutely, Jordan. What we're seeing is that it's so important now. You have one chance to make a first impression. And the way buyers used to come and look at a property, they'd come and look at it once, they'd come back a second time, maybe a third time. Now they're using a lot of the digital format that Jordan mentioned. They're looking at 3D floor plans, they're looking at the photos, the virtual tours, and they're using that a lot of times as their first showing. So by the time they come and look at the house in person, their mind is pretty made up. So they're walking in the door, looking at a house, that's kind of their second and often third time showing. And they're just looking for that confirmation that everything they saw online is validated. And the pictures that they've looked at, that the kitchen cabinets are really as nice as they're seeing online, that the bathrooms, the fixtures, the tile work, that's so important to them. So again, as they walk through, they're looking for validation. And so a lot of times it's just one time in the property and people are going back and making an offer. So another way things have changed a little bit is through open houses. So Jordan, you want to talk about open houses?
Yeah, so open houses have changed a little bit. So for a while there, right when COVID had just sort of started affecting our area, we were seeing open houses were not permitted by both DC, Maryland, and Virginia. In the last couple weeks, each municipality has relaxed their guidelines a little bit, and open houses are now permissible in all 3 jurisdictions. Interesting though, although they're permissible and agents are holding open houses, we're actually seeing attendance to be down quite a bit. This is not entirely surprising, but what we're seeing is that on a typical open house that previously maybe a really hot property, we would have seen 20, 30 groups even come through a property. That particular house is now seeing maybe 10 to 15. So it's nearly a 50% reduction on traffic. And then we're also seeing certain open houses either have no traffic or open houses have 1 to 2 groups. We're suspecting that that's partially because people are, of course, anxious a little bit about being in a house with other people. our responsibility as agents is obviously to try to keep group mingling in properties down. We are keeping contact information because contact tracing is something that we need to ensure that is available should a COVID exposure happen. And we're trying to keep group numbers down. But I think it's an individual decision as to whether a buyer decides to attend an open house. What we're finding is people would prefer to have private showings where they can ensure that only their agent and them are in the property, which is obviously reducing the risk of having an exposure. So the next item that we're going to talk about, which might come as a little bit of a surprise, is the market, and the market is not slowing. Ned, take it away.
Yeah, the market's not slowing at all. Real estate is based on a very simple foundation of supply and demand. And for a few weeks after the coronavirus appeared, yes, the demand went down, but it did not last at all. Demand is as strong as ever in the DC metropolitan area. And so a lot of the market statistics are showing that demand is really high. However, supply is not as great as it used to be. A lot of sellers are reluctant right now to put their houses on the market. And so we are seeing a lot less supply and a huge demand. Another thing that is driving our market is interest rates. Interest rates are incredibly low right now. Some of the lowest we've seen, oh my goodness, in all my years doing this business. That's also a major driver for buyers because the cost of owning a home now is lower because your payment is lower, your interest rate is lower. So again, supply and demand, supply down, demand has remained high. In fact, some people even say demand might be a little bit higher and interest rates are low. So the market is going at a very good pace in the DC metro market. Let's also talk about the trickle down effect. Jordan, take it away.
So what we're finding with COVID is that it has had a couple other trickle down effects in the way that business is typically conducted. Sort of the hidden elements that maybe on initial glance we didn't really consider was going to happen. And this is regards to settlements, inspections, and other parts of the real estate market. So what we're finding is typically settlements were an opportunity for the buyer, the seller, the agents, and the settlement attorney to be in the same room to have sort of this nice moment where everybody's happy, selling their house, there's this ceremonial exchanging of keys, all those great items. Now, that's not really available at all. What we're finding is that we are doing split settlements where the buyers are attending settlement solely with the settlement agent, the seller is attending settlement solely with the settlement agent, and the agents themselves are typically not attending settlement. And that's for obvious reasons. We're trying to reduce the amount of people in the same room and the amount of cross-contamination of different people. This also has that effect with home inspections. So a lot of home inspection companies are asking that both the buyers and sellers are not in the homes. Typically, a buyer would attend the home inspection with the home inspector, but that is obviously being reduced heavily. Most inspection companies are asking that everybody does not attend, that both the buyer and the seller remain home and the home inspector goes on their own, either shoots video, does a FaceTime, does a call, and then obviously goes over the report. And lastly, when it comes to showings and it comes to termite inspections, appraisals, etc., in addition, that's a time where the seller is again having to leave the home, which is something a little bit less convenient, I would say, than it used to be, where maybe an appraiser would come while a seller was there. In this case, again, trying to limit those bodies in the house. So therefore, they're asking that the photographers, etc., all these people are asking that these sellers be outside the home so that just the photographer, appraiser, etc., is in the home at the time, again, eliminating the exposure. Well, that concludes our 5 changes since COVID in the DMV market. Look for future videos in Real Rich Advice where we talk about other different items, whether it's going to be COVID related or other property related. And if you have any questions, obviously shoot us an email at info@richteamre.com, and we'll happy to maybe feature one of your questions in one of our upcoming videos. Talk to you guys later. Thanks.
Thank you for your time.